So in this series on idols, we're doing this sermon specifically for our online audience so that you can hear it or see it. In my family growing up, we were not allowed to date until we were 16. But in the 9th grade, I fell in love with Robin Newton. And I got my parents' permission to go with Robin to the Tolo. That's the dance where the girl asks the guy. And that was a very big occasion for me. But shortly after this special day, Robin started dating a really big football player. And I was heartbroken. Now, at the time, there was a song by Phil Collins called Against All Odds. And I literally would play this song every night. So take a look at me now. There's just an empty space. There's nothing left here to remind me. Just the memory of your face. I know some of you would like to sing along with me. At age 14, my life was over. Why was I so devastated? Because I had turned romantic love into a god. And that's precisely what our culture does. Listen to how one well-known psychologist puts it. Romantic love is the single greatest energy system in the Western psyche. In our culture, it has supplanted religion as the arena in which men and women seek meaning, transcendence, beauty, and ecstasy. Listen to how one Spanish poet puts it. Always you were the reason for my existence. To adore you for me was religion. This religion has its own beliefs. Somewhere out there is Mr. or Mrs. Right. When you find that person, your life will be complete. Until then, your life is empty. How will I know? Trust your feelings. Love is a feeling you can't control. Love is a potion you drink. And once you drink it, you're under its spell. This religion also has its own morality. And I can't fight this feeling anymore. That's the key. Don't fight the feeling. Act on it. For you to not act on your feelings would be wrong. When movie director Woody Allen had what was then an affair with his wife's 21-year-old adopted daughter, he said, "The heart wants what the heart wants." In other words, there's nothing I can do about this. You can't deny the heart what it wants. That would be wrong. In our modern world, God no longer has center place, but we still have a need for meaning and transcendence. So we now look to romance and sex to give us that. As Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ernest Becker puts it, the love partner becomes the divine ideal within which to fulfill one's life. All spiritual and moral needs now become focused on one individual. In one word, the love object is God. We turn the love partner into God. That's why so many of our love songs sound like worship songs. We speak of our beloved in the way that Scripture speaks of God. Take, for example, this love song by Sarah McLachlan, who I like. I like her music a lot. In one of her songs, she sings this: "You stay the course, you hold the line, you keep it all together. You're the one true thing I know I can believe in. You're all the things that I desire. You save me, you complete me. You're the one true thing I know I can believe." Now, I'm not sure who she's singing about, but I know she's not singing about me. If we sing that song to a person, that is idolatry. No human being holds it all together. No human being saves us or completes us. That is turning a person, a relationship, romantic love, into a counterfeit God. And folks have been doing that for a long time. Just look at the story of Jacob and Leah in Genesis 29. Jacob is Isaac's son, and Jacob has an older brother named Esau. And unfortunately for Jacob, Esau is Isaac's favorite son. Esau gets the privileges that Jacob doesn't. As Timothy Keller points out, Jacob, with his mom's help, steals Esau's blessing. And when he steals Esau's blessing, Esau is so mad that he wants to kill Jacob. So Jacob flees for his life into the wilderness. Now at this point, Jacob's life is in ruins. He had lost his family and his inheritance. He would never see his mother and father alive again. His life was empty. He had never had his father's love. He had lost his beloved's mother love, and he never knew God's love. Jacob is then taken in by his mother's extended family, and he beholds the woman of his dreams. He moves in with his uncle Laban, who has two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah, the older daughter, isn't so attractive, but Rachel is a looker. The Hebrew text literally reads that Rachel had a great figure, and on top of that was beautiful. Jacob is smitten. Here is the woman of his dreams. If he can just have her, he can finally have the love and affirmation he longs for. So he tells Laban, I'll work for you for 7 years in exchange for your daughter, Rachel. That's almost 4 times the ordinary price for a bride at the time. In verse 20, we're told, so Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. I used to see this verse as sweet and beautiful, but now I see it as a sign of infatuation and idolatry. Listen to the next verse. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her. Now, as one scholar points out, the Hebrew here is unusually graphic and sexual. Imagine, even today, someone saying to a father, I want to have sex with your daughter now. Give her to me. There's a common saying that goes like this. Men use love to get sex, and women use sex to get love. Now, there's always exceptions to generalizations when this is a generalization, but there's something to it. As a tendency, men turn sex into a counterfeit God, and women turn romantic love into a counterfeit God. We see this in Genesis 29. Jacob is after apocalyptic sex. He has put in 7 years of work to have sex with the woman of his dreams. Do you think it's possible that in our society we have turned sex into an idol? Fairly obvious question, I suppose. Take Hawaii's very own Bruno Mars. Great singer, great performer. He stood up on one of the biggest stages in the world, halftime at the Super Bowl, and sang these words. Never had much faith in love or miracles. Never want to put my heart on the line. But swimming in your water is something spiritual. I'm born again every time you spend the night, because your sex takes me to paradise. Your sex takes me to paradise. Because you make me feel like I've been locked out of heaven for too long. For too long. Now, even though this is just the online version of this sermon, I'll stop there to keep it PG. This song clearly says that sexuality is the path to spirituality. If you want to experience paradise, if you want to truly live, you got to have sex. Not having sex, according to this song, is like being locked out of heaven. And yet, Jesus Christ was the most fully alive, fully human being ever to live, and he never had sex. And those who follow Jesus are called to have sex in the context of the gift of marriage. Now, is that a challenging part of Christian discipleship? Yes. But is it the end of the world? No. As we look at our culture, here's what one therapist in Philadelphia said in looking at what she sees around her. She says, "It's not easy to shock me, but one 11-year-old girl's parents discovered their daughter creating her own pornographic website because it's cool among her friends." We have turned sex into an idol, into a god that we worship. And I don't say this pointing the finger at anyone else. I say this knowing my own struggles with sexually alluring material on the internet or on TV. Both outside and inside the church, we have turned sex into a counterfeit god. One time, many years ago, my wife and I were in Australia for 3 months, and we were living in a Baptist Bible college, and I participated in a pickup soccer game. The soccer game was the married guys against the single guys, and some of the married guys were late, so the single guys were kind of complaining. And then right before we began this soccer game, one of the single guys said, "I can't wait to get married. Sex on demand." Sex on demand. That's what marriage is, according to a Baptist Bible college student. That's a scary mindset. And it sounds a lot like Jacob's. "Give me my wife. I want to make love to her." So after the wedding and a few drinks, Jacob goes to bed with his wife, who is heavily veiled, and he wakes up in the morning to discover that it's Leah and not Rachel. So Jacob then has to work 7 more years to marry Rachel in addition to Leah. Leah is now stuck in a marriage with a man that doesn't want her. Verse 30 specifically says that Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. Leah was the daughter that nobody wanted. And Leah's response to this situation shows us once again that men use love to get sex and women use sex to get love. Leah becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son. She names him Reuben and says, "Surely my husband will love me now." Again, she conceives a son and names him Simeon, saying, "God gave me the son because he knows that I'm not loved." Once again, she conceives and bears a son, saying, "Now at last, my husband will finally be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons." How sad. Timothy Keller writes, what was Leah doing? She was trying to find happiness and an identity through traditional family values. Having sons, especially in those days, was the best way to do that. But it wasn't working. She had set all her hopes and dreams on her husband. She thought, if I have babies and sons, then my husband will come to love me, and then finally my unhappy life will be fixed. But instead, every birth pushed her deeper into a hell of loneliness. Our culture trains women to wait for Prince Charming, for the man of their dreams to sweep them off their feet so that they can live happily ever after. That puts women in a place where so much of their identity and value is tied up in being wanted by men. And this need to be wanted can blind them to reality and enslave them. I think that's why we see movies like, "He's Just Not That Into You." In other words, ladies, You may be putting all your hope in Mr. Right, and Mr. Right may be out dating other women. Break free from this idolatry. In Keller's book, we meet a woman named Sally, who, as he puts it, had the misfortune of being born beautiful. Early on, she saw the attention and power that her beauty gave her. But over time, she came to feel like she was nothing unless a man was in love with her. She couldn't stand being alone. And this need to be loved by men meant that she was willing to stay in really unhealthy relationships. As she put it, men were my alcohol. Only if I was on a man's arm could I face life and feel good about myself. That's idolatry. And that's a recipe for wrecking our life. When we make other people a god, we set ourselves up for disappointment big time. You know, my wife Cindy is amazing, but she isn't God. Every relationship, every marriage is made up of two very needy, imperfect people, and the sooner we learn that, the happier we will be. 1 John 4 says that God is love. That means that God is the example of love and the source of love. Cindy loves me a lot, but my need for love is so great, Cindy can't fill it. My need for love is infinite. Her ability to love is finite. If I put the weight of my needs on her, I will crush her with my expectations. No person can give my soul all that it needs, but God can. God's ability to love is infinite, and that's exactly what I need. That's exactly what each and every one of us needs. The truth of the matter is that we all experience disappointment in the realms of romance and sex because we've turned these into an idol and we expect too much from them. This was supposed to be more than this. This was supposed to be more than this. We live with disappointment. C.S. Lewis describes this so well in Mere Christianity. He writes, most people, if they have really learned to look into their own hearts, know that they want and want strongly something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but none of them quite keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or first think of some foreign country, or first take up some subject that excites us, are longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can really satisfy. I'm not now speaking of what we would ordinarily call unsuccessful marriages or holidays or careers. I'm speaking of the best ones possible. There was something we grasped at in that first moment of longing which just fades away with reality. I think everyone knows what I mean. The wife may be a good wife, and the hotels and scenery may have been excellent, and chemistry may be a very interesting job, but something has evaded us. We all long for more than what others can give us. And when this disappointment hits, we have some choices. Here are 4 options. First, we can blame the person who's disappointing us and move on to someone else. This feels great in the short run, but in the long run often leads to repeating the same cycle. Second, we can blame ourselves. What's wrong with me? Look at all those happy couples out there. I must just be a failure in love. Third, we can blame the world. We can become cynical and say, oh, men are trouble. I will never date or marry again. Or fourth, we can turn to the one true lover of our soul. We can turn to God. As C.S. Lewis concludes, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. If I find in myself a longing that no lover can satisfy. I was made for another lover, a better lover, the lover who is love. That's what Sally, who I mentioned earlier, discovered. A counselor helped her see that she was looking to men for her identity. And this counselor suggested that she should focus on a career instead and become financially independent. But Sally realized that she was being asked to give up a common female idolatry for a common male idolatry. And she didn't want her self-worth dependent on men or on a career. As she put it, I wanted to be free. One day she came across Colossians 3, where Paul writes, "Your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, you will appear with him in glory." She realized, men are not my life. My career is not my life. My true identity is Jesus. From then on, when a man would show interest in her, she would say silently, "You may turn out to be a great guy, but you can never be my life. Only Christ is my life." And as she chose Jesus in this way, her wrecked life was restored. Whether we're 18 or 80, single or married, the best thing we can do is to fall in love with Jesus. No one can ever love you like Jesus. He stays the course. He keeps it all together. He's the one true thing I know I can believe in. He is all the things that I desire. He saves me. The only way to escape the counterfeit gods of sex and romance is to find something better. The only way to free our hearts from these idols is to give our hearts to Jesus for the first time, or again each new day, to gaze upon his beauty and to fall in love with him. Amen.